Hello, everyone. Today, we'd be discussing a couple of strengths and weaknesses of the research that was conducted by Hassett et al. Now, this research that was conducted by Hassett et al. In the year 2008 is a recent addition to our syllabus that changed in 2024. Now, in order to help you understand these strengths and weaknesses, I'd like to give you an example of a 10-mark evaluative question. Now, this typical 10-mark evaluative question, you'd come across this question in paper one. So the first thing we need to know is we'd be tested on this in paper one. This is the last question that you come across. And remember, 10 marks out of 60, they hold a lot of value. Now, to be able to attempt this question, remember, out of 90 minutes that you get to sit for your paper, you need to spare 15 minutes for this, right? At least 15 minutes for this. So you make sure you are done with the first 9 questions in the first hour and 15 minutes and leave the last 15 minutes at least to be able to attempt this question. Now, if I may read this question, the question over here, the example that I'm using over here is of the research that was conducted by Hassett et al., like I mentioned. And let's read the question. The question over here reads, evaluate the study by Hassett et al., that is monkey toy preferences, in terms of 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. At least one of your evaluation points must be about standardization. Now, keep this thing in mind. For this particular question, the examiner demands 2 evaluative strengths, 2 evaluative weaknesses. Additionally, the examiner uh, provides you with a named issue. You could call it a name issue, or you could call it an evaluative point that the examiner expects you to include in your answer. So essentially, there are 2 strengths and there are 2 limitations. For you to be able to ensure that you're scoring a 10 on 10 on this, I'd like to give you an example through the answer that we have written on the screen. Now, if I read this question, if I read the answer over here, the answer over here reads, the first strength of the study by Hassett et al. Was its standardized procedure. Now, why is it that I'm expecting you to write it in this particular manner? Now, you're being very clear to the examiner that you have started your answer with the first strength. Now, a typical question that is asked by many students is, do we include an introduction? No, you do not need to include an introduction. Kindly do not include an introduction, because remember, the time you have is limited. Remember, the space that you have is limited at the same time too. Now, if you have a look at the specimen paper, you might as well download it from the internet. For this particular question, you're getting 40 lines, right? For all the other questions, for instance, if you come across a 2-mark question, you get 4 lines. For a 4-mark question, you'd get 8 lines. For a 6-mark question, you get 12 lines. But for this specific question, that is the last question, the 10-mark question, the specimen paper has given you, through this specimen paper, you know that you get 40 lines to be able to write this. And I think 40 lines, they're more than enough. Now, to begin with, the first strength of the study by Hassett et al. Was its standardized procedure. So the first strength that has been the first strength that has been identified over here is standardized procedure. You might as well use the opportunity to let the examiner know that you know what a standardized procedure is. That is, each trial in the procedure was the same throughout the study. For example, the researchers now, this part, for example, the researchers positioned a pair of toys, one wheeled and one plush, in the outdoor area while the monkeys were waiting indoors in the same manner for each trial. Now, I'm highlighting content from this answer with different colors to remind you of what all you need to keep in mind while writing this answer. You might as well learn this first and then try to practice accordingly so that you adapt it. And when you're writing this answer in the examination, you do not face any problem. So, for example, the researchers positioned a pair of toys, one wheeled and one plush, in the outdoor area while the monkeys waited indoors in the same manner for each trial. These toys were always placed 10 meters apart. Now, I highlighted the first part in yellow, the second one in green. Now, the third color that I'd like to use over here is pink, and I'll tell you why I'm differentiating these. Now, standardized procedures allow other researchers to replicate the study in exactly the same manner, hence increasing chance of reliability. Now, do you see I have put this particular strength or divided this particular strength into 3 parts? Let me write this down. The first part that I used, the first thing that I did over here was identification. I identified the strength. Number two, I'll just take this over here, this part. This is identification, the yellow one, right? Number two, the second part, I linked it with the study. Now, what do I mean when I say I linked it with the study? I used specific examples from the study to let the examiner know that I'm not just bluffing. I'm not just using standardization as a strength. I exactly know what part of the study was standardized so that whatever I'm writing or whatever you're writing as a student holds value, right? Now, the third part over here is you writing down about how it impacts or how it affects the credibility of the research, right? Let me say that again. For every strength or weakness, I'd I advise my students, I'd like to advise you all to divide your strength or your weakness into three parts. The first part being identification of the strength. The second part is linking that strength with specific parts of the research. And the third one is writing down how it would eventually impact your answer, right? Impact the study, how it actually impacts the study. So the first point over here is standardization. You showed the examiner where exactly you thought the study was standardized, and you told let the examiner know. You let the examiner know that this standardization of procedure, what sort of impact would this have on the research? This would help other researchers be able to replicate the study or conduct the study in exactly the same manner, and this increases chances of reliability as well. Moving on to the second strength. Now, another important thing that I'd like to advise. I I'd always advise my students to write the answers in block paragraphs. Now that you're getting 40 lines, I think you have ample of space, and this is an answer that is written in front of you. I mean, depending on how big or small your writing is, if you're writing your answer in different paragraphs, and these paragraphs being block paragraphs, this would help the examiner identify where a particular strength ends and the second one starts, right? Now, the second strength over here, again, the second strength, be very clear, let it be very simple. The second strength of the study is the ethical guidelines for working with animals they were being upheld. Now, the second strength that you're writing over here is the ethical guidelines being followed by the researcher, the ethical guidelines for animals in this case. Now, how was this? How is it that Hassett et al. Did this? These are guidelines that ensure. Now, this is again you further explaining what you mean when you write down about ethical guidelines. Okay, I'll just remove this part, the highlighted part, and begin it from here. Hassett et al. Ensured that the monkeys were housed within the usual social groups in a 25-meter square outdoor enclosure with a temperature controlled indoor area. They had constant access to water, ate monkey chow twice a day, and were fed fresh fruits and vegetables every day. Now, this green part again shows the examiner that you know what you mean when you're saying there were ethical guidelines being followed in this research, right? Now, how is it that this is going to impact? Following ethical guidelines upholds scientific integrity and maintains public trust in psychological researchers. So again, you do see the exact same format being used. You know what? If you're someone who's looking forward towards a 10 on 10, especially if you're someone who is looking forward towards scoring in the top band, in the top level, the examiner also looks for how organized you were. The examiner also looks for the extent to which you showed a discipline and you came well prepared, right? So, of course, if you're looking forward towards 10 on 10, you might as well prepare yourself for a 10 and 10 and then practice it. So, this was the first strength here. This was the second strength. Okay. The third over here would be a weakness. Remember, the examiner said two strengths, two weaknesses. Let's do what the examiner requires us to do. Nothing more, nothing less. So having a look at this, the first weakness of the study could be the sampling technique that was used. Now, sampling technique refers to the way the sample is recruited for a specific study. Now, how is it that this is a weakness? Let's see this. All the monkeys were from the same troop in one enclosure at the Yerkes Center. There were only rhesus monkeys available at the time of the study, and hence this makes it an opportunity sample, the way the sample was recruited. Since captive monkeys may have different dynamics as compared to monkeys in wild while choosing objects to play with in real life settings, therefore, the findings of the study may lack generalizability. Now, again, the same procedure used in exactly the same manner. You leave a line over here. This is what we mean when we talk about a block paragraph. How difficult it is. You just need to learn this and then keep on practicing accordingly so that you do not find it difficult when you sit for your actual examination. Now, moving on towards the weaknesses over here. The second weakness over here. The second weakness of the study was in terms of the comparisons made between the findings of the study on monkeys with that on children. Now, as you all must be aware, the research that was conducted by Hassett et al., the procedure, it entailed monkeys, right? But towards the end, the findings of the study were to be compared with another study that was conducted on children, right? Now, for example, or for instance, the toys given to the monkeys were chosen based on their physical properties and not because they were stereotypically gender toys for children. Additionally, the children were assessed in a different study using different toys while only measuring the duration of play and not the frequency. This comparison can raise questions on the conclusion drawn from the study and hence lower the validity of the research. Now, do you see the same procedure? I mean, the same format has been used over here. Just have a look at this. The first strength, the second strength, the first weakness, the second weakness, right? And I'm still left with a single line over here, right? So I hope this has been helpful. Practice accordingly. I might as well just keep these still over here so that if you want to take a screenshot, you may, of the first strength. Now a screenshot of the second strength if you would want to. The first weakness and the second weakness. Now, you do not necessarily need to rote learn this. I just used an example over here to help you understand this better. And yeah, remember these 10 marks, they hold a lot of value when it comes to a 60-mark paper. There are only 12 studies. So in other words, what I'm saying is there are 12 questions you practice and the chances of you being able to score better in your CI in paper one specifically increases. Another important thing, remember the examiner asks you to write down to evaluate in terms of two strengths and two weaknesses, right? And there are four things that are required, right? For this particular question, there are four things that are particularly required. And out of these four things, the examiner only asks you to give one strength or a weakness according to their choice. So if I put it this way, for this particular 10-mark question, 25% is what the examiner tells you to do, yet 75% is what you do on your own. So the more you practice, the better you score. And there are a couple of frequent evaluative points that the examiner uses. For instance, it could be ethics, it could be validity, it could be reliability, it could be operationalization, it could be experimental design for experiments, it could be a particular type of experiment, so on and so forth. So I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.